It was the year 1066, a time when the world was changing. In the cold, misty seas of the north, a Viking ship sailed toward England. The Vikings, once feared warriors, were now fading, but one man still dreamed of bringing their power back. His name was Harald Hardrada, the last great Viking king. Harald was a tall, strong man with a thick beard. He had fought all over the world, from the icy lands of Norway to the warm shores of the Mediterranean. But now he had set his sights on England. After the death of King Edward, the throne of England was up for grabs, and Harald believed he should be the one to take it. With a fleet of ships and hundreds of warriors, Harald set out for England. His men were brave, and they had sailed across the seas, hoping to make a new home. But they weren't the only ones with their eyes on the English crown. A man named William, the Duke of Normandy, was also preparing to claim the throne. And standing between all of them was Harold Godwinson, the current King of England, who had no intention of giving up his crown. Harold and his Viking army met Harold's Saxons at Stamford Bridge, just outside the city of York. The battle that followed was fierce. The air was filled with the sounds of shouting men, the clash of swords, and the crash of shields. Harold fought at the front, leading his men with strength and courage. His sword swung through the air, cutting down any Saxon who dared to get close. But despite his strength, Harold's army was caught off guard. The Saxons, with their sharp tactics, quickly turned the tide of battle. And in the middle of the fight, Harald Hardrada was struck by an arrow. It pierced his throat, and the great Viking king fell to the ground. With their leader gone, the Vikings couldn't hold their ground. The Saxons pressed on, and soon the battlefield was covered with the bodies of fallen warriors. Harald Hardrada was dead, and with him died the dream of a Viking empire in England. The Saxons celebrated their victory, but the story didn't end there. Just days later, another battle was about to begin. News arrived that William of Normandy had landed in southern England. The battle for England was far from over. After Harald Hardrada's death at Stamford Bridge, the Vikings were forced to retreat, leaving England's throne once again in dispute. Though the Vikings' dream of reclaiming the northern kingdom had ended with bloodshed, the power struggle for the English crown had only just begun. As the autumn winds swept across the English countryside, a new threat loomed on the horizon. News of the death of Harald Hardrada reached the Duke of Normandy, William, who had been gathering his forces for months. William, claiming that he had been promised the English throne by King Edward, saw the victory at Stamford Bridge as a mere prelude to his own ambitions. On September 28, 1066, William set sail from Normandy with an army of thousands, soldiers, archers, and cavalry. They landed in southern England at Pevensey, unopposed, and quickly began to make their preparations. William's army was disciplined, well-supplied, and ready to face whoever stood in their way. Back in England, King Harald Godwinson, victorious in his battle against the Vikings, now faced an even greater challenge. His army, weary from Stamford Bridge, had to march south at once to confront the Normans. By October 14th, Harold's exhausted Saxon forces met William's army near Hastings. What followed would decide the fate of England. The Battle of Hastings was fierce and bloody. The Saxons, formed in their traditional shield wall, stood firm against the Norman knights and archers. For hours, the two armies clashed in a brutal struggle, neither side willing to yield. But in the end, the Saxons, exhausted and outnumbered, began to break. The turning point came when Harold, fighting at the front, was struck down by an arrow to the eye. With Harold's death, the Saxon resistance collapsed. William, now known as William the Conqueror, claimed victory. He was crowned King of England on Christmas Day, 1066, beginning the Norman conquest and forever changing the course of English history. Harald Hardrada's legacy, though short-lived in the grand struggle for the throne, was not forgotten. His fierce will, his ambition to revive the Viking glory, and his bold charge at Stamford Bridge would live on in legend.